This message is brought to you in part by the Surf Market Pete's Coffee Bar. Our Pete's trained baristas can make that perfect cappuccino, latte, or mocha to hit the spot any time of day. Prefer a cup of freshly prepared drip coffee? We have that too. Cozy up with a cup of warm goodness anytime. We're here for you.
And good morning, everybody. Peggy Berryhill here with you. Peggy Berryhill here with you. And wow, we have a lot going on that you can't see behind the scenes. But we thank you for joining us this morning on Peggy's Place. We have a great guest. This guest is always wonderful because he also has this beautiful sundown shining behind him every time we talk. We're talking about Richard Charter from Bodega Bay. And we're going to talk about something that's very important to all of us who live along the Sonoma and Mendocino coast. We'll be talking about that in a moment. Leanne Lindsay is driving in the background, and I must say it's nice to have a backseat driver. Just one announcement this morning. There is a Celtic Roots concert. The group Kalos, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Kalos, Saturday, April 1st at 7 o'clock at St. Paul's Community Center, 40 School Street in Point Arena. And this is the old church that has become a community center for Point Arena, and it's a wonderful place to see people. Okay, my messages are going all over the place, and the weather disappeared. So what I'm seeing is it's around 37 degrees outside. No rain expected, so that's a nice break for us all right now. And we're just going to jump in and get started. I don't like my lighting here, but that's the way it goes. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Always glad. Richard Charter is, boy, I don't know how to describe you anymore. Long time ocean savior, warrior, fighting to save the coast in Sonoma County, Mendocino County, but actually all over the world. He is an expert on the health of our oceans and also looking at the future, and in particular, the future of the oceans that may become places where instead of looking out at those beautiful waves and sunsets, in addition to that, we might see wind turbines out there and other kinds of offshore platforms. And so now's the time for us to think about, is that what we want to see? And Richard and I are going to talk about that, but it's beyond looking at it. The question I always have, Richard, is, are they really going to be effective in helping us with our continuing quest for more power for our utilities and our cars? But let's get started, Richard, and tell us, the first thing we're going to talk about is this meeting coming up in a few days, April 4th, I believe.
I never forget living here on the coast that this is a national treasure. We're surrounded by incredible beauty and lately some pretty good examples of the incredible power of the ocean and its meteorological effects. Any day I look out the window and I don't feel like I'm in a car wash in my house, I feel like it's a good day, and today's a good day. The California coast is governed by a set of laws, really, that were passed by the voters and then passed by the legislature. The California Coastal Act. And the California Coastal Act means that there are certain rules here that keep it from being destroyed, basically. And that Coastal Act is divided into local coastal plans, county by county. Each county has one. In your readership, viewership, each county has one. Mendocino County has a LCP. And the Sonoma County local coastal plan for the last few years has been updated. In other words, to anticipate emerging issues, the next set of threats. And there is a next set of threats. And so the final public hearing on that is coming up for our Board of Supervisors at 2:30 in the afternoon next Tuesday, April 4th. So that's, I think, why I'm here today.
That is why you're here today. And I also want to remind our listeners that you can also watch this interview live on YouTube right now, where Richard is sharing a beautiful screen show behind him, some wonderful shots. That last was that I can't remember, was that a raven in the sunlight that you showed us a few seconds ago? That was amazing. Now we're looking at pelicans? No, long beaks. But anyway, go ahead.
This is the Farallones.
Ah, okay, the Farallon Islands. You know, Richard, you're absolutely right. Leanne and I were chatting online before we went on the air about how lucky we are to live here along the coast and enjoy the beauty, the sunrises, the sunsets, the birds, the animals, and yes, the amazing strength of nature when we think about the storms that we've just gone through. And we're all happy to have a respite today. But this can all change quickly. So this event next week is a chance for, as Richard is telling us, for you to make your concerns known directly to the Board of Supervisors. Now, do you have to be there in person?
The Sonoma County Board of Supervisors is still doing virtual hybrid hearings. So you can phone in, you can log in online by going to the Board of Supervisors website, and you can speak, virtually by Zoom.
Great. Has that been, have you experienced any of these virtual meetings?
Well, during the height of the pandemic, I did do virtual Zoom meetings. The last one of these I thought was so important that I masked up, went in and took off my mask long enough to speak. But you can do it either way. Obviously, this is such a key time. And I think generally our Sonoma County Board of Supervisors and their predecessors have a very long history of taking good care of their coasts, as you can see from how it looks today. And I think we can anticipate that again, but you need to back them up. They look for public support for what they're doing. And I think in this case, they have a choice of either strengthening the local coastal plan or weakening it. And clearly the message is to strengthen it.
Great. Well, let's explore that a little more. Yes, we do have a lot going for us out on the coast, but I'm always concerned about this quest for energy that's going on. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And we are the problem, the consumers. And we're told that we need electric everything, electric cars, that we're going to no longer be able to use gas, put gas stoves in our homes. And that is a tremendous amount of energy needed from the grid. And the grid is already having trouble with that. So how do the supervisors and how do we as just residents balance those things, Richard?
Well, the supervisors, I think, are reacting to what they see as a federal and state move toward what's called floating offshore wind. This is different than the East Coast, where offshore wind turbines are put on fixed platforms and anchored to the seabed with a spar. This is a floating device, kind of like the Deepwater Horizon, in fact, built by the oil and gas industry. That's who builds floaters. A floating barge, essentially, with a very large wind turbine on it. And there will be dozens of these off the coast of Humboldt County, and maybe even they've leased an area of hundreds of acres off of Humboldt County already for this purpose. And the next map that we've been looking at shows the Mendocino Area of Interest, it's called. So this turbine array could come all the way down the Mendocino coast. What we're paying attention to here in Sonoma County is opposite the Sonoma coast. We have many protected areas. We have the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary. We have state Marine Life Act, marine protected areas, and we have a UNESCO International Biosphere Reserve. So what we're looking at is if there are large arrays of wind machines put on the Humboldt coast, where are the cables going to go? And we know that currently Humboldt State is doing a study for the wind energy industry that is studying 4 different cable array options, originating in Humboldt Bay and coming south to the load demand center in the San Francisco Bay Area. In other words, you can't use all of this electricity in Humboldt County. There's not enough demand. So where the electricity from offshore wind off of Humboldt would go would be San Francisco Bay Area. The maps that we're seeing that show 2 offshore cable routes, one very close to shore, skirting around the mouth. There's a series of undersea canyons, as many people know, off this coast. Under the ocean, there are canyons on the scale. One of them, the Monterey Canyon, is on the scale of the Grand Canyon. But here we have a series of canyons, and the 2 cable routes, the nearshore scenario brings it closer to shore, and the one further offshore goes around the canyons, around the canyon heads. So the question is, where does this come ashore? And the draft maps show it coming into the Golden Gate. But the problem with the Golden Gate, anybody can tell you that's ever been involved with commercial fishing or anything else, the Golden Gate is subject to such severe tidal scour and powerful currents, and there's a complexity of land use issues. That means that cable's coming ashore somewhere else. So we hearken back to the days when Interior Secretary James Watt wanted to build an onshore support facility for offshore oil in Bodega Bay Harbor, in the inner harbor at Bodega Bay. Another one at Manchester. The whole town of Manchester was going to be blown away for an onshore facility for offshore oil. And we look at what induced the counties of both Mendocino and Sonoma, a couple of 2 of the roughly 21 counties and cities that passed onshore facilities ordinances that said if you want to build something huge on this coast, you have to put it to a vote of the people. So in the Sonoma County LCP, we have taken that principle and we have applied it to any kind of offshore industrialization. It could be offshore wind. It could be a electrical power cable from offshore wind. We're not saying don't do it. We're not opposing offshore wind. We're saying if it's going to come into Bodega Bay and follow the planned route of a power line across Marin that was to have been built for the Bodega Head nuclear power plant. I mean, there was going to be a nuke on Bodega Head and another one on Point Arena. So there are leftover rights of way. There are leftover planning corridors for power lines.
You know, yeah. To the what so-called hole in the head.
Yeah,
that it is in Bodega Bay headlands. It's still there, and that was what that was originally supposed to be. Correct.
Correct. And so what we see is that some of the properties around the Estero Americano, south of Bodega Bay, there are still corridors left from PG&E when they plan to put a nuclear power plant on Bodega Head that would take the power to the Bay Area. We believe that creates sort of a crime of opportunity, if you will, for a company. Many of the lessees for offshore wind are, in fact, offshore oil companies, Shell, British Petroleum, Stat Oil, now renamed Equinor to sound more ecological. So we have in the draft LCP that is for Sonoma County that's going to our board next Tuesday. We have expanded the original ordinance that we put in place in 1986 to include not only any kind of offshore industrialization, whether it be offshore wind, it could be a power cable, it could be a hydrogen pipeline. From offshore wind, they may be bringing hydrogen by pipeline to the Bay Area. And also, one of the side effects that hasn't been talked about much is in converting to electric transportation, we're going to need minerals from the seabed. And so we're looking also at strip mining the seafloor. And so we've included that as one of the industrial facilities that would not be blocked, but would have to go to a vote of the citizens of Sonoma County if something like that were to be proposed in Bodega Bay.
You know, all of those, looking at these maps and graphs that you've shown us in these actual pictures, the one that the radio audience can't see behind us is something used for mining lithium and other kinds of rare metals, I guess they are, that we need. I mean, we all use them. I'm using it in my computer, on my phone, on, my car, everything right now. We all do it. But at what cost? And here you're talking specifically to those of us who live in Sonoma and Mendocino County, the cost, we can actually see what's going to happen. You showed us some graphs also of different lines. Oh, there's a tractor on the bottom of the ocean, who knows, scouring down there. We're talking about these lines, though. I mean, they have to go somewhere. I can't imagine how large they are, traveling from the coast inland, whether it's in Humboldt, Mendocino, or Sonoma County. Are they going up Salmon Creek? Are they going to go? How are they going to? That's this amazing amount of work. And
we have an interesting feature on the southern end of the Sonoma coast called the Estero Americano. Mm-hmm. It's a very pristine estuary. It's actually to the mean high tide line. It's part of the Greater Fair Isles National Marine Sanctuary. And the Estero Americano is the subject of a lot of protections. In other words, the waters are a marine sanctuary. The county of Marin to the south, through their malt program, has protected a lot of the agricultural lands. And on the north side, the Sonoma County Agricultural and Open Space District has protected and unsubdivided some of the lands to the north side of the Estero. It's just like a Norwegian fjord. Most people don't even know it's there because it's not particularly accessible. Around that, there were mapped and drawn into people's deeds a right-of-way for a major overhead power line from Bodega Head Nuclear Power Plant to the Bay Area. So we believe that would be the most likely route it would follow. There's really only two places to bring a power cable ashore in this area, and that would be either Bodega Harbor entrance or Tomales Bay entrance. So I would expect that if and when, and we've made it through the planning commission, the board seems to be quite sympathetic to this. And the recommendation from the planning department is that the board adopt this. If we're able to maintain local control in this way, and that's what we're talking about here in Sonoma County, simply maintaining local control over things that otherwise would completely blow away the town of Bodega Bay. I mean, forget about it. We're talking very large structures that are multi-stories high. And take up a lot of space. We're just maintaining local control over that, and the idea is we thereby could have a say in whether, how big, and under what conditions it gets sited, and that's what we're thinking ahead, if you will. We know that there is a move, obviously, to offshore wind. I'm showing now a electrical power substation on the coast that serves 62 turbines off the coast of Brittany. It looks a lot like an oil rig, if you can't see it, obviously, on the radio, but it is the oil companies that are going to build these things. So we're using the same tools that we developed in the 1980s to make sure, not to stop it, but to make sure that we have an understanding with these companies that we are going to have local control over what happens and where.
So looking at these big structures that, yes, for those who are listening to us on the radio, they look sort of similar to a large oil structure that you have seen out in the ocean. Richard, give me a little bit more of detail and an idea. So if I'm living in Bodega Harbor, am I going to be looking at these just offshore? Are they going to be toward the head? And then on land, we will be looking at large cables overhead, like telephone cables?
That describes one scenario that's under study. We don't know yet. In other words, this is a emerging industry, and it's coming all at once. In other words, instead of starting, a lot of us have been following Amory and Hunter Lovins, for example, for about 30 years. The idea of decarbonizing the power grid, decarbonizing the transportation scenario so that we would rely more on electricity. Always with that was painless energy conservation. The idea that, more energy is wasted out the windows of America every day that comes through the Alaska pipeline from Alaska. We can cut back not on our use so much, but on our waste. That has not happened to a great extent. A little bit not criticizing, better insulation and dual pane windows, more economical vehicles, but where we are now is that the California Energy Commission, directed by the California State Legislature, is saying we need to go all in, all out on floating offshore wind off of Morro Bay and off of Humboldt County now, and soon to come to Mendocino Coast. And so there is a big rush going on. And the concern is that in a rush like that, you don't always get the best plan.
So let's say the worst case scenario is that nothing is stopped, that these platforms that we're looking at go through. How soon in the future would we expect to see these monstrosities offshore?
The original plan for an offshore oil and gas support facility, for example, in the Bodega Bay Harbor, would have been right on top of the earthquake fault at Puerto Bodega, right on Bodega Bay. It was quite a few acres. It was a staging area for offshore drilling off of Bodega Head. The proposed offshore oil support base, oil and gas processing plant, it was at Manchester, would have taken up pretty much the whole town of Manchester in Mendocino County. So we believe that the template that the wind industry is working from, because they are the oil industry in many ways, they can see the future, even if they don't admit to that needing to be the future. They probably are targeting the same locations for the same type of facility, but we don't know yet. And so there are these urgent studies going on, and as we see, Humboldt County has, green lighted the leasing, and the leases have happened, and the Coast Commission has gone around with the leasing, given it found it to be consistent with its federally approved coastal zone management plan, the actual leasing of tracts off of Humboldt and Morro Bay. The question now is how big, where, and where's the electricity going to go? Humboldt County is still deciding. There's a proposal for an onshore finfish aquaculture operation in Humboldt Bay, right next to where the staging area for the wind turbines would be. That could take some of the electricity. So a local use might emerge. We don't know. Humboldt had a nuclear power plant. It was decommissioned, or I think they're still finishing up decommissioning it. And the bottom line is we have a transition in society in which we need to think about all of the possibilities, and particularly the possibilities of what's it going to do to our coast.
Well, yeah, you've said so many things that have got my mind spinning, and I hope the listeners as well, and the viewers on YouTube, as we are live on YouTube this morning. This is Peggy's Place on KGUA in Gualala, 88.3 FM on the internet. at kgua.org. Just hit the listen live button. We're talking with Richard Charter, who is part of the Ocean Foundation. He has done, as you can hear, studies helping us protect the ocean, but also looking at the future. What does it mean? And a large part of that future has to do with us as individuals. And there is a meeting next Tuesday, I believe, at the Sonoma County Supervisors to talk a bit about some of this future on the Sonoma coast, whether there will be those giant platforms for wind turbines. And it's just so hard to imagine driving up and down the coast. You say Humboldt has already agreed that there's going to be something happening there. Not sure. So far in Mendocino, we don't have anything happening, but the odds of it happening just south of us in Sonoma County are pretty strong. And a lot of that is part of us just as consumers, the demand we have for all of this electricity. How are we going to get it? How are we going to sustain it? And at what cost? And so for those of us who all live along the coast, it's about the life in those waters as well. We have to think about all of the marine mammals, the birds, everything that is important that keeps our fishermen working. I think about the fishermen and how they just keep getting their seasons are cut back and cut back and cut back. And yet we all want those fish or whatever it is, the crabs. We want to eat that. What's going to happen to those? Are they going to be poisoned somehow? So there's beautiful sunrises and sunsets that those of us who live along here get to enjoy. Those of you who come out here on the weekends, Richard, you know well that on a weekend in your county and our county, we can have 20,000 people up and down our coast to enjoy it. Well, those 20,000 people also want their luxuries of their cars or their whatevers, computers, watches. All of that stuff is run at the expense of nature and of the oceans. I don't know how we can resolve this, Richard, because I can't see it stopping.
One of the things about the way the Coastal Act is structured, the state plan that guides, we enjoy this coast and we don't think about how did it stay this way? We very nearly lost Petty Island at the mouth of the Russian River to be dredged to be hauled into barges offshore, combined with a chalk mountain from Big Sur and used to build BART. And out of that was going to come a thing called Jenner Bay, which would have been an open piece of water at Jenner, surrounded by condos running up both sides of the river mouth. And a 4-lane freeway was coming along the Sonoma coast from Petaluma all the way to Jenner. So there would have been basically New Jersey on the Sonoma coast. We live here amidst things that were stopped because average citizens who recognized that we live in a very special place looked out the window and said no. As Peter Douglas, the late Peter Douglas, who was executive director of the California Coast Commission many times, was fond of saying, the California coast is never saved. It's always in the process of being saved. And nowhere is that process of being saved more important than when the county updates its local coastal plan. The update of the LCP essentially is the roadmap for the next 10 to 20 years of this coast. What's it going to look like? Are we going to, lose things that we care about? And now's the time to decide about that. And a lot of people have worked very hard on the draft local coastal plan for the last roughly 8 years. But this is the final hearing on that. And so we're kind of down to realistically, this is a set of decisions that we will live with for the rest of our lives.
Thank you for saying that and using the term realistically. For those of us who are not as learned as you are and have been studying this forever, what do we say to our supervisors? How can we, again, I keep coming back to this dilemma that we as humans have as our increasing consumption of all of these minerals and just space on the earth to satisfy our needs. So how do we, oh my gosh, I don't know what that tractor thing is. It must crawl under the earth and has digging things on it.
It's a remote control bulldozer about the size of your corner Safeway that is used for extracting minerals from the seabed. What we say to our supervisors, and unfortunately, I think both Mendocino and Sonoma counties are pretty good at electing environmentally conscious people to local office. We're lucky in that, and it's one of the reasons why our community looks like it looks, is because we elect the right people in most cases. But what we say to them is strengthen, don't weaken the local coastal plan. That's what we're saying here in Sonoma County. We can do that in person. And of course, from Walala, it's a long way to Santa Rosa Board of Supervisors chambers in Santa Rosa is a long way. But you could say that online, or you can send them an email to bos@sonoma-county.org. We'll give that again at the end. But there are many ways you can communicate with county supervisors. Obviously, everything south of the middle of the Walala River is Sonoma County. There are other issues that people care about. I know, like the Walala River redwoods. There's a controversy going on in and around Timber Cove about what amounts to a new town that would be built just north of the Timber Cove Inn between Highway 1 and the ocean, in environmentally sensitive habitat involving 10 houses, bigger than the house I raised 3 kids in, a spa building, a welcoming center, and a swimming pool between Highway 1 and the ocean, blocking the view from Highway 1, and then it would eliminate public access during certain events to the coast. Very sensitive issue. That guy came from New Jersey, and he's now trying to eliminate special protections on about a dozen parcels in Northwest Sonoma County as part of this LCP update. He wants special favors. The other issue that emerges in the LCP is we have very carefully followed a model to control the use of pesticides in the local coastal plan, in the coastal zone. And because we know that our wildlife is suffering, the top of the food chains, picking up these anticoagulant rodenticides. And so we have followed a model that's been supported by the Coastal Commission and used in Malibu, the Santa Monica Mountains, and Ventura County have all done this. And we're about to do it here in Sonoma County. In the coastal zone, you wouldn't be able to use the kind of pesticides that have migrated upward into all of our top predators, our hawks, our owls, we've all followed P22, the mountain lion that was sick with this stuff. I mean, 80% of the top predators in North America have these poisons in their liver when they're bioassayed. And so we're dealing with kind of a host of issues, but the general trend is all aimed toward cleaning up our act, making sure we can maintain local control, and not letting outside corporate interests, whether they be an oil company or a developer from New Jersey, not letting them come in here and tell us how to manage our coast, because we think that our elected officials have done a pretty good job so far.
Well, all I can say is yikes. This is a lot of great information you're giving us, and good reminders of what we as citizens have to do for the safety, not just of the ocean and the sand, but the mammals and the birds, but for us as humans as well. How we manage our future and our future needs. That's a terrifying thought to think of. I didn't know about the Timber Cove plan to put the condos up there. And is that still on the drawing board with this developer?
It's like a new town. And the problem is, obviously anybody can walk up to a planning desk and ask for a permit for something. In this case, the gentleman has hired his own lobbyists, which is very unusual at the county level, to try to get certain parcels in Northwest Sonoma County over the last roughly 30 years have had special protections put on them by previous local coastal plans. They were so important that the LCP said, take care of this place. And one of them happened to be on the Timber Cove Inn, which could have been built today. I mean, just septic and water alone, let alone, it's a nice place, but you couldn't build it in 2023. Putting another one next to it basically is believed to, by the owner, to require a lobbyist. So that lobbyist is trying to remove not only that special protection, which would prevent expansion there, but about a dozen other parcels would lose their protection as well. So we have some interesting forces at work in both in Mendocino County, outside money coming in to cash. What we've done is, by protecting this coast, we've created a cash cow that attracts outside investment of big money from other places, usually the East Coast. And so now we need to make sure that that is done right. You know, even though it enables people to come here and enjoy it, we protected it from offshore drilling. The question is, can we protect it from the those who would profit from selling it basically as a commodity?
We're hearing, following up on that, we are hearing of people who are investing in some of the hotels in Mendocino, the ones that need fixing up.
I saw that story.
Yeah, so it is happening all around us. I'm trying not to be to help our audience not feel overwhelmed, but help us understand the actions that we can take for the future and it's not just because we live out here, but because everyone should have the right to come out here and see the whales migrating, or see the dolphins migrating, or see the pelicans, and not seeing the harm that can come from all of this progress. It's cumulative. It will happen. Where in the world is this already happening, Richard? What countries, nations can we look at where this is already being done?
You mean offshore wind?
Offshore wind, let's stick with that.
In the European Union, there are many places where smaller scale, I would say, it started, the best way to introduce a new technology is to introduce it gradually, learn at a smaller scale, and then proceed to scale it up. Here, we're going all in, and it's a different technology. It's a floating offshore wind device, which brings it into the supply chain. Everything's built by the offshore oil and gas industry. That's who builds these machines. That's who supplies all of the supplies. So it sort of biases the leasing of these tracks to the oil industry rather than the wind industry. There's both, but they've kind of merged into an interest group, and they're big. I mean, this is big stuff. In California, the vision of our governor and our California Energy Commission is to have always on baseload electrical power provided by Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant. That was agreed upon to be shut down until recently, when they decided to keep it going, because you need a baseline electrical power baseline source. That will be Diablo Canyon, and possibly a more modern nuclear facility I would expect at the same location. And then in California, there is a curve of demand that doesn't always agree with the curve of renewable production, because of day and night, because of when the wind blows. And so the hope, I believe, by the energy planners, looking through the lens of energy only and not, oh my God, what a beautiful coast, looking through that lens, is that offshore wind could fill in some gaps in that energy curve to meet demand at times when other renewables like solar are not producing because of weather or darkness or whatever. So that's the fantasy, but you've always got to have nuclear power behind this.
Mm.
And that's another part that they don't tell us about, is this is all based on continued use of nuclear power plants.
Well, let's look at what just happened in the past major storms that we've had here on the coast. And with the strain on the grid already, some of it I understand from people who work in the industry is because with the rise of electric cars and people plugging them in, that wasn't accounted for. The grid, I mean, instead of putting the needs of the grid and really looking at what we need for this future grid ahead of time and how we're going to meet those needs in the best way. Obviously, I hate to say, obviously, we're going to have to make some sacrifices, but in the around us, but just that thing of get electric car, plug it in has raised a major put a major load on the existing grid. It's not ready for that. Again, looking at all of these options, hearing people like yourselves share with us information, how we as simple consumers can make sure that the future we can balance these. I don't know if we can, how we balance that. I'm not scientist, but I am a consumer. I like my electronics, I like my hybrid car. I'm not ready to go all electric, but it's causing a drain on our grid. And we're seeing that. And with the storms that we just had, the brownouts, I think we had 30 brownouts in one day in our neighborhood. All of that is the strain on the grid.
I have been to Olala since January. I know that you're missing a few fences, a few trees, and quite a few power poles. Living on this coast has never been easy. If you talk to some of the old timers who talk to their old timers, the people who settled here were tough people. They had to be, because it is not an easy place to live. It may be that we are having more frequent and more intense storm situations driven by climate warming. It's entirely possible, but I have seen in my life, living on the coast here since '76, I've seen in '82 waves come over the cliffs on the Sonoma coast that are 90 feet above the water. Not often, but it happens. And power outages, you always have firewood. I mean, where I live, if you don't have firewood, you're not paying attention if it's winter. The bottom line is in a transition to a new source of electrical power, whether it be wind or wave or whatever's next. I mean, I believe in science. I'm an optimist. I think science will advance in a way, if we guide it, in a way that will enable us to transition off of oil. We need to do that, obviously, because it's not helping anything, and especially it can't be helping the climate. And a lot of these decisions are made in Washington, D.C., so we need to pay close attention to our elected officials at all levels. But oil is the past, and the future is to decarbonize energy, including and especially the electrical power grid. And California is a logical place to start, because we have the consciousness, we have the willingness, and we have the ability to do that. And we've seen horrible oil spills here. And so everybody knows what happens if you maintain your maintenance on oil, you're going to have another Deepwater Horizon sooner or later. It's just inevitable. So the question then becomes, how can we transition reliably, not losing anything, toward more efficient use of the energy we need? More efficient. Efficiency is really key. Conservation, so that things aren't just going out the windows, and everybody I know is weather stripped. They're weather stripping, basically. And the question is, do we really need mega mansions with 14-foot ceilings that are running off of propane, out in the middle of the wilderness? Is that necessary, or have human beings throughout history managed to live on less and perfectly comfortably? And other parts of the world are proving that, yes, you can live perfectly comfortably and, without necessarily sacrificing nature to do it. That's our challenge. I have 3 very smart grandchildren. I have great faith in them to work things out, but I'd like to not leave them a big mess. I'd
Well,
I'd like to have them be able to turn on a light and know it's not killing something somewhere.
Hmm. All right. So with all of that background and talking to our radio audience and our YouTube audience, how we're going to balance out our needs, the needs of our grandchildren and great grandchildren that are only going to get greater. How do we balance this out? We're going to bring it down to where it counts is in your local governments and your local counties. And that's what we started this program about today. Richard Charter from the Ocean Foundation wanted us to know that there is a meeting on Tuesday, I believe, a Board of Supervisors meeting. They have regular meetings, but here is your opportunity, in particular, Sonoma County residents, to go to that meeting and express your concerns, or how to have some input in what the future can be. As Richard said, we're not going to stop it. It's, all of these needs are just growing exponentially because we as the consumers are asking for all of this. So what do we do? What do people say, Richard? I'm going to ask you to put some words in their mouth so they're not just going there and, can't stand this, got to stop it. What kind of words can they use to get their supervisors to listen to them?
The most important message is the local coastal plan, which is the map of the future. The local coastal plan needs to be strengthened, not weakened. That's really straightforward. The work that's been done by Permit Sonoma, the planning department here, to date on most issues has been approved by the planning commissioners already. And stick with the planning commissioner's version of things. Don't get sidetracked by one developer from New Jersey that wants to weaken it. Strengthen, don't weaken the local coastal plan. And this is at 2:30 in the afternoon, next Tuesday, April 4th, in the Santa Rosa Board of Supervisors chambers, but you don't need to be there. You can phone in, you can Zoom in. The links are on the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors website. Too long to provide all of that on the air, but Sonoma County Board of Supervisors website, and you'll see a link to testify on this agenda item. I believe it's agenda item 48, but it comes up. They stick to their timetable, so it'll be 2:30 in the afternoon. If you can't get there, you can send an email right now, today. They're reading them. It'll be in their packet that they get handed on Friday. Each supervisor gets a packet of mail during the week. And that email address to reach all supervisors is BOS, like stands for Board of Supervisors, BOS at sonoma-county.org, BOS at sonoma-county.org. And that will be distributed to if you send it today, it'll be distributed to every supervisor this Friday. All you really got to say is strengthen, don't weaken the local coastal plan. Thank you.
Strengthen, don't weaken. Very simple, straightforward. Strengthen, don't weaken. Richard, I don't have a lot of other questions for you today. I mean, you're so good at presenting this. It's very straightforward. We've talked about worst case scenarios, but the strengthen, don't weaken is, I think, the simplest and a great way to put it, because we are all in this together. The other thing is we elect those people. So if, we elect them, then we need to help them make decisions as well. And that's our role as citizens here, to not neglect that. And that's about all. I don't have a whole lot more. We do have about 8 minutes left. Any things you want to add to this?
I would just say that the beauty of living in a democracy, the national dialogue is getting kind of interesting. We're back in the name calling and finger pointing. And today the U.S. Congress the House of Representatives is probably going to pass a bill to require more offshore drilling in sensitive areas, believe it or not, for oil. The Republican dominated House of Representatives is doing some very crazy things that will never pass the Senate, obviously, but you still need to know about them and worry about them. But the thing about Washington, D.C. is it's far away, it's inaccessible, and they don't hear us little small voice. We have small voices. With a local government, where you live in a coastal supervisorial district and you know your supervisor, or you should get to know your supervisor, you go to the Mother's Day picnic or whatever and hang out with your supervisor, you can have a voice. Not like Washington, where it's far away and distant and inaccessible, but here, it's right here. They know what's going on. They know we just had 14 bomb cyclones, and we're still reeling, trying to get our roads and electricity back. They know that people have had damage, and they understand, how much people value the coast. This is a national treasure managed by local people. It's here today because local people cared about it. They didn't let them build a nuke at Bodega Head. They didn't let them build a nuke at Point Arena. They didn't let them haul away Penny Island to destroy Jenner. They didn't let them put a freeway and a water aqueduct on the Sonoma coast. It is local people who, it's a whole phenomenon. I hope someday somebody writes a book about it. Why people who live here step up, volunteers, not paid, step up to defend this place is, I have no idea. I mean, I'm part of it. I've been part of it. And, a lot of my life, I've been fortunate to have a job that allowed me to do it. But most people, including me for years and years, do it without pay. Why do we do that? I don't know, except the only explanation I have is this is such a spectacular place that it brings out something in your heart. It causes you to want to take care of it. People have beach cleanups. They go down and pick up garbage and trash and paper plates and cigarette butts, and they work with their local officials to make sure you don't wind up with offshore drilling, and you don't wind up with inappropriate, James Watt tried to bring subsea mining here once before. We've been there. We know what that's like. We fought it, in the past, undersea mining off of the Gorda Ridge, off the Sonoma, off the Del Norte coast. And the bottom line is, I think the public is coming to understand, if you don't take care of it, it will disappear. Simple.
That is simple. There is another side of this we haven't talked about at all, though. What about the jobs? What about the economy? Everyone, because of COVID and for whatever other reasons, we all know that little communities like ours here on the coast are drying up. And that does make them vulnerable to people who have lots of money who want to come in and do other things.
Visitor serving industry done at a decent scale, attracting the average person. I don't think we want to become a Disney-fied coast where we only cater to really rich people, who fly into San Francisco, drive up here for a day. I was camping at the south rim of the Grand Canyon, and the ranger was telling me every week he gets about 3 tents, because people come to the Grand Canyon from the EU, buy a tent and fly into LAX, buy a tent, and then go to the Grand Canyon. When they leave the tent behind. It's a thing. People collect places now, and I think we need to be careful that we have enough places to camp, so that not everybody has to have a 3-night minimum. Nothing against vacation rentals necessarily, but we don't necessarily want everybody that comes here to have to spend $3,000 for a weekend. They deserve to come here. They will be inspired perhaps to help protect it when they see it. But the average person should be able to come here in a truck or a bus or VW bus and stay at, Stillwater Cove County Park or, Walala Point and camp. And that's how I grew up anyway, is, normal people who don't have a lot of money can still enjoy this place. We need to make sure they don't clog up our roads, which down here on Sonoma County on your average 3-day weekend are starting to look like San Jose. But this is what we have an LCP. This is the reason we have a local coastal plan, is to plan to accommodate reasonable enjoyment of this place, keep our economy healthy, without going to giant industry, and destroying it in the process. It's a matter of balance. And I think the local coastal plan right now, the draft we're seeing that will come before our board next Tuesday, that local coastal plan draft is balanced.
Excellent. Well, it's good to know that it's balanced. It's good to know that, again, I think there are enough of us, excuse me, out here who appreciate the visitors, but yes, don't want it to be a millionaires playground, billionaires, where, as you say, the camping, having access for everyone to just come here and enjoy it, whether it's overnight or a couple of nights, or even, just for a day or two, to just breathe in the air. It's such a difference to just sit in the sand or on the cliff and just take that deep breath and recognize that you're part of nature. That's so absolutely important. It's what you grew up with. We've heard your story a few times, and that, the lessons that are important for us to remember, all of that. But participating in your democracy is also the message. It is your democracy. It's our democracy. It's a very precious thing we have here. And don't want to let go of it. I sure don't want to let go of it. So, Richard, we'll ask people once again Tuesday if you can be there in person. If not, just go to bos.org.
BOS
at
sonoma-county.org. You can send it one email and it will be forwarded to all 5 supervisors. I was taught early on when I started trying to save the coast that it's all about 3 votes. Every board of supervisors is 5 supervisors generally, and so you need 3 votes. I think we have 3 votes. Please help us make sure we have 3 votes at 2:30 next Tuesday in Santa Rosa.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we're going to let you go, Richard.
Thank
Really
you.
Appreciate it. We'll post this information in a bit. And as always, I'm learned so much more, and my knowledge gets deeper and deeper as I talk to you, because I had such limited knowledge in your field and all the work you've done. But I am very much, admittedly, a consumer as well. And I want to make sure that my consumption is not going to be damaging. You just put up this slide. I'm glad you brought that back up. This propeller thing, where is that located?
This one's off of the EU. These are getting pretty big. These wind turbines are not your little backyard turbine anymore. They are too big to fit under the Golden Gate Bridge. This is the big industry that's coming to Humboldt County, and the impacts will stretch from really the Oregon border to San Francisco. So we need to be vigilant about our coast, and the most logical way to do it is in our LCP.
So this thing I'm looking at on screen for the radio listeners is a propeller. It looks like a propeller, three arms to this.
It's a 3-bladed turbine. We see some medium-sized ones over by Suisun Bay on the way to Rio Vista sometimes. These are bigger. They would be towed out of a new port at Humboldt Bay. Humboldt Bay seems to think they want them. This is a really big deal. And of course, behind it is all the money, power, and lobbying capability of the offshore oil and gas industry. So we need to take care that we watch out for local interests in the process, or they'll tell us what to do.
Okay. I'm going to let you go. That's it.
Thank you
so much. And this,
so much.
Listeners, this will be repeated at 1:00, and this YouTube conversation will be there until it's not. Okay. Take care, Richard.
Thank you so much.